welcome back to a new episode of Saturdays with Dad. Today we're going to be doing like a sort of joint video where we're both talking about albums today. And the subject of today's video is our top 5 completely instrumental albums. So we have a lot of different albums varying in genre and length, I guess. So because this is Saturdays with Dad, you can pick the first album on your pile.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think that the instrumental album is very misunderstood. I think that what we're going to show in the next few minutes or so is music now of a completely beautiful quality that obviously just lacks the human voice, but we'll start now, okay?
So you can pick your first one.
And it's quite funny I'm picking my first one, and it's because I'm now going to show you an album which would probably be in my top 10 albums of all time.
And that would be?
This is the album, Mirage by Klaus Schulze. Klaus Schulze is an interesting chap because he basically formed Ashra Temple with Manuel Gottschalk in the late 60s, and he was basically a drummer then. Yeah. He was an absolutely brilliant musician. He then sort of migrated to work with the likes of Edgar Froese and also Peter Baumann in Tangerine Dream, but he really exploded in the mid-70s and 80s, well, early mid-70s, 80s, and certainly into the modern era now. But this album is a personal favourite of mine. It has a sort of like dark quality to it, because he composed this music when I think his younger brother had passed away, and so there's a very, if not dark, but very melancholic aspect. But a lot of it was written when he was going from, I believe, Dusseldorf down to Stuttgart by train, and he was overlooking the Lorelei. And there's only 2 tracks on this.
Of course.
Crystal Lake. I can just get the album out. So what we have is the Velvet Voyage to start off with, which is wonderful. I mean, it starts. It's just sort of a mass of dark, echoing, almost screaming music, and then it explodes into something else, and then goes very calm as there's a throbbing beat. But that was just the hors d'oeuvre. Then comes Crystal Lake. Crystal Lake is one of the most beautiful pieces of music I've ever heard. It's sort of slightly got, at the beginning of it, slightly has tuba bellsy kind of thing attached to it, you know, with sort of a little bit of glockenspiel and things like that. But it is so moving. It's just wonderful.
And that makes it one of your favourite
I could be here for the next half an hour talking about this album, but this is an essential album. So this is Mirage by Klaus Schulze.
And when was that released?
1977, I believe.
Okay. Right, so I'll pick the next one then. Have you listened to this yet?
I've not listened to that, no.
This is Camel, the prog band, of course. Music inspired by The Snow Goose. The Snow Goose being a novel as well. That's what the music's based on, I guess. It's like music to literature. It's bordering classical music at this point. Like,
alright.
You know, you have obviously the progressive rock, which is inspired by classical music and all that, but this is pretty much, it's like classical music but with prog instruments.
Alright.
And there's very, very little like vocal in here. I think there isn't any. But it is very, very good, and it's very beautiful sounding, and you know, Camel's sound is very interesting. Different to a lot of progressive rock bands out there. It's more on the melancholy side of the spectrum rather than the experimental side of something like King Crimson. But it is very pretty sounding, obviously, and you've all probably heard this already. But this was released in... Oh, does doesn't say on here, Dan.
I don't know, it's probably early 70s.
I assume something like that. Yeah. But it is very, very good. So I would recommend this one to people who want to get into the more instrumental side of progressive rock, bands who are doing instrumental albums. So that is a very good one to start with.
We've seen two wonderful albums. As I say, I don't really know the Camel, but Camel are a great group. So now we're going to go back almost a generation now to the founding of really where we were going with prog music and everything. In other words, jazz. And if we're talking about 1959, if we're talking about John Coltrane, Bill Evans, Miles Davis, Cannonball Adderley, and obviously Paul Chambers. I think it's Paul Chambers. Yeah, Paul Chambers. We're talking about one album, aren't we, really?
I think we all know. You guys probably know what we were talking about.
You probably all know what we're talking about. This is wonderful. It's a kind of blue. This is actually an OMR original masters recording of it. It's
a Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab copy.
And it's a limited edition. This one is 14810. This was remastered in 2015. I don't feel the need really to go through every track because every track is just one beautiful piece of music from So What to the end, which is my favourite piece, which is, I think the album, there's the piece of music that actually Bill Evans composed in this, which is Flamenco Sketches, which I just adored. It's one of the greatest pieces of music that have ever been made. It's probably up there with the classical giants like, Wagner's music or Mozart or Beethoven. This is just so beautiful, it's undescribable. There's an interesting anecdote attached to this piece of music, and that is apparently, what was the name of Michael Jackson's producer? Quincy Jones, that's it. Apparently Quincy Jones is said to never get up in the morning without listening to Kind of Blue. And, I'm pretty good.
You can respect that.
Respect that from a great musician like him. And that is how brilliant this album. And no instrumental, let alone our top album of all time, is without this. So this is Miles Davis, A Kind of Blue.
I'm going to skip forward 60 odd years now. So this is The Endless River. This is the last studio thing that Pink Floyd have released so far. I doubt that they're going to release anything else, to be honest. But this is just a compilation of stuff that was never released, essentially. I think there's lyrics, but it's only in like one track. I think the last one. But it is very, very, very good. I got this as a gift from Johan, actually, because it was one of the Pink Floyd albums I hadn't heard yet. And Pink Floyd doing instrumental interested me, of course, so I decided to listen to it, and it sounds it's Pink Floyd. Where can you go wrong? It's fantastic. It's just Pink Floyd basically just without the singing, that's it. And it sounds very, very good. It's well composed and just beautiful. So this is The Endless River, and this was in 2014, and I think it's a double album, but I could be wrong.
Well, we're going back to the 70s, and we're now talking about a group I alluded to earlier, Tangerine Dream, and this is the album Rubicon. I love the whole of it. I mean, it's ambient music. It's just wonderful.
Yeah.
It's a band at the height of their powers, I believe. And it's basically two parts. There's no tracks as such. It's just Rubicon. Yeah. It's almost like a symphony. It's like
Tubular Bells would be like part 1, part 2.
Yes, and it's different movements and things like that. So it's wonderful. It's the three guys again. The last it escapes me, but Peter Baumann and Edgar Froese. And this is complete must if you like strong, ambient, progressive, beautiful music. So this one here is Rubicon, and it's by Tangerine Dream.
And what year was that?
This was the year that I actually went to see them. I think this is 1975. I think this is 1975.
You can correct us if we're wrong.
But I'm probably wrong. But it's just, if it's 75, it's the same year I saw them at the Royal Albert Hall when they were really, really good.
There we go.
So that's Rubicon by Tangerine Dream.
So my next album is this one right here. This is the Fripp and Eno collaborative album, No Pussyfooting in brackets. Have you heard this album?
I've heard one side of it. Yeah, it's very good. I mean, it's going to be good because you've got Brian Eno and also Robert Fripp there. When was this made?
I think this is 1973 or 74. So.
Yes, because they returned as a joint venture again together with towards the end of the 70s.
With David Bowie.
With the David Bowie Berlin sessions. So, you know, what you've got is one great producer and musician in Brian Eno, and you've got one just incredible musician in Robert Fripp.
So, talking of the musician or music side of this album, this is only a two-sided album, just one long piece on each side. I just love the way that these two people use their instruments and use the instruments on the album, the guitar tones and the way that Robert Fripp uses his guitar on this album. Very interesting. It was something I'd never really thought of before because I was used to listening to King Crimson. This is definitely a step aside from King Crimson. It's nothing like King Crimson at all. Not even the guitar tone or anything. It sounds so different, and the ambience of the keyboards as well. And of course, as you mentioned in the production of this album is fantastic. It's so good. As someone who's studying production, it's very noteworthy. It's something I like picking up on different producers' production techniques. So this one is very interesting. If you haven't heard this yet, this is one to check out. So this is, I think, 73 or 74. This is the Robert Fripp and Brian Eno collaborative album. So on to your penultimate album.
If I was to say there was a better album made by Tangerine Dream, I would slightly struggle. But in this album, Fedora by Tangerine Dream, I think I found it. I think it shades it for me because there's a bit more cutting edge to it, and it has that semblances, whatever it's called, on the second side of Fedora. The actual title track's lovely, but there's a track that opens the second side. Is it? I can't read it, honey.
Mysterious semblance at the strand of nightmares.
Oh, that's wonderful. And again, it's a beautiful piece of music. I think VIII, I love VIII, but I can only put so many Tangerine Dream albums on. But this one here, out of all their pieces of music, is the one I love, and it's just so beautifully crafted. It's Tangerine Dream again at their very best, and you know I strongly recommend it. It's so relaxing, without being boring. It's just, you just can sit there of an evening with a glass of wine or whatever, and just sit there and just let it and relax and let it go. It's just a fantastic piece of music, one of the great albums of all time in German music, modern music at its absolute finest. So this is Fedora by Tangerine Dream.
So on to my penultimate album. I don't know if you are familiar with this one, but this is one of my favourite of the Yes solo albums. So here we have Six Wives by Rick Wakeman. And talking of Rick Wakeman, we just watched the 2017 Yes induction speech before
Rock
filming.
and Roll Hall of Fame, yeah.
Very enjoyable.
Well, very enjoyable, but mainly because of Rick Wakeman's speech, which was just, Rick Wakeman is what he does, isn't he? He's hilariously funny.
Alright, but going back to music, this is just a very well put together album. Lots of different, obviously, piano techniques, which is something that interests me as someone who used to play quite a lot. Different sounds kept all the tracks more interesting. All the tracks were different, and it wasn't just the same thing over and over again. It's a story told through music, which is something I love a lot, and it's got the historical aspect to it, which I like a lot as well. I was very interested in learning about the Tudors ages ago, so listening to this was like, oh well, that's interesting that someone could just put this to music. I actually know the story of this album, how it came around. He picked up a book at an airport about the 6 wives of Henry VIII and just decided to put it to music. He had lots of previous stuff that he didn't know what to do with, so he just formed it and made this album. And it's a fantastic album. Have you heard this one yet?
I've heard it a few times.
And it's very good. It's one of my favourite of the solo stuff. But I do love the Chris Squire Fish Out of Water album, but this is probably my favourite one. So on to your last one.
No, second last.
Second last? Oh, you have 6, don't you? Well, you're on your second last now. I said penultimate last time because I thought that was your second last.
So we were talking about Klaus Schulze in the 70s and VIII and Mirage and albums like that. So Klaus Schulze in the 80s teamed up with my favourite drummer of all time, which is Michael Shreve, and his brother with Kevin Shreve, and created this album, which sort of went really under the radar. So
some new recommendations for you guys out there.
So it's possibly a new recommendation. This is Transfer Station Blue. And this is it's great combination of sort of Latin rhythms and ambient music that both Mike Shreve and Klaus Schulze are masters at, and it comes together beautifully in this package. The communique, which is lovely, which has got the old Santana, and also View from a Window, which is just absolutely lovely. But it's all great. It's, as I say, made in the 80s. I absolutely adore it. Neve's best friend, her father was the guy that introduced me to Klaus Schulze, and I'm forever in his debt. I hope I returned him the favour with other bands, but this is I think if you like that kind of music with a sort of like throbbing Latin rhythm with also ambient music, then this is an album for you. I think you may find it quite difficult to get on vinyl, but I think it's freely available as a download on Spotify.
And we've got a lot of
CD.
Got a lot of prog fans out there, so they'll probably like this. You guys will probably like this. I've not heard it, but just from what you've described, this is my last one. I didn't know that we could pick 6, so I've only got 5.
I couldn't not pick 6. And you'll find out the reason why.
And it's coming out.
Here it is.
The classic 1973 album, instrumental, Tubular Bells, by Mike Oldfield. This is, I mean, what can one say that hasn't been said already about this album? It's so beautifully put together, very, very excellent musicianship, mainly played by one person, which is very inspiring, to be honest. And obviously being so young when this album was being made and published and all that kind of stuff. So it's absolutely this is a deluxe edition. We got 5.1 in here. I just read that now. And it's just, I don't really need to say much else. This is one of my favourite albums of all time. I have a very vivid memory of the first time I heard this album, well, the first side at least. I was on a train back from London, and this came on a playlist, it came on shuffle from a playlist called, I think, Prog Monsters on Spotify. And I was, going back on the train, back from London, I was looking out the window and it was dark out, because I think it was winter. Yeah. And you could see all the London lights and stuff like that while Tubular Bells was playing in the background. So it was quite fun, and it was a memory that I'm going to probably remember for a long time. But it's one of my favourite albums, and if you don't have it already, what are you doing? You should have this album already. Yeah.
Well, I think that most people have it because it's sold so many copies. I mean, it's arguably the album that made Richard Branson.
And what are your opinions on this album?
Well, what can I say? It's a classic, an absolute abiding classic.
And you like it a lot, then?
I do love it a lot, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful piece of music. And all these guys who are my age now, watching this channel, will also remember watching The Exorcist and that marvellous scene when the priest was walking outside the house and the fog and everything, and you suddenly hear the piano bit of the start of the Tubular Bells.
Lovely.
But as I say, I think that album sold so many millions of copies that it really did. Having said that, though, in their own way, you know, that Tangerine Dream were on Virgin Records as well. And you know, he's clever, Richard Branson. He signed up the right kind of acting pieces of music and touched on a note which everybody felt.
I mean, there's only like very, very limited speech on this album, but I wouldn't class it as vocal. So yeah, 1973, Tubular Bells, and that is my final one. But you have one more.
Right, you thought you'd get away with this, but you haven't.
I thought I wish I had a sixth album. I can pick a sixth album.
I have to put this in, not only because I love it, but because it is one of the great solo albums. And I think you deadheads out there know exactly what I'm talking about. Yes, it's this album, Hoot Roll by Jerry Garcia and the great keyboards player Howard Wales, who'd been working with James Brown and a lot of jazz. You know, I think he did work with Miles Davis and everything like that. And they put this sort of like concept album together called Hoot Roll. It's just got some fantastic songs. Morning and Evening in Marin County. I mean, it's the 1 a.m. approach. The album ends with Evening in Marin. Birdside Southside Strut is fantastic. Has that big band jazz feeling to it, and then Garcia ripping into his guitar. Up from the Desert, and there's a lot of cool ambient stuff with Garcia's guitar, and you know, Howard Wales then reverting from an organ, Hammond organ, into sort of like a electric piano and an Uri piano. It's just fantastic. It's got great musicians on it. I think John Kahn's on it. It's a guy who normally appears as bass guitarist for Garcia's solo projects. But it's just, what can I say? It's Jerry. Look at the t-shirt. It's wonderful.
Right, so that is the conclusion for today's video. If you guys out there have any favourite instrumental albums, please let us know in the comments. We'll be happy to read them and then kick ourselves about the ones we didn't include in the video. So Monday is another episode of Prog Mondays, as you know. Yet to think of something for that day, but yeah, hopefully, talking of Jan, to get Jan back on the channel at some point.
Yeah, it'd be nice for Monday.
We had like a 3-way chat. That would be quite interesting, actually.
Yes, I think so. Very much so. I'd say get my brother on as well, but then you'd just take the channel over.
But yeah, so see you guys on Monday and Dad next week.
Absolutely.
If we do a possible unboxing next week, you'll probably see him then, but if not, Saturday.
Definitely.
Bye-bye.
Have a great week. Bye.